I'd like to share my experience in China with the internet. I'm not really the type of person to get on camera and record myself talking for an extended period of time. So I'm going to try to keep this very, very short. I'm going to try and keep this very concise. I'm going to try and tell you about my experience at EF and working in China. I have some bullet points here, so I'm not like rambling about. But if I can't do it in one part, then I'll make a part two. This title is not clickbait. This is definitely my experience in China. I've been there for about 2 months, and I would say it is not exactly what you see on social media. Depending on the type of person you are and the type of country you come from, your experience in China will greatly differ from your counterparts. Now, EF is a very global company. It's very dominant and well known in the East, especially in East Asia. You don't hear much about EF in the Americas over here. And I also would like to mention my experience being black in China as well as being a black American in China. And I like to start from the very beginning with EF. There were some red flags and I ignored them because I was thinking with a half glass full mindset, not a half glass empty. I was thinking more about the prospects of a new life and making more money than you need, as opposed to not noticing the red flags. So the first red flag was actually during the first interview I had with my recruiter. Everyone had a different recruiter, but my recruiter, his name was Will. And Will, he kind of we had our first like video chat. And in the very first video chat, you see how I'm kind of like moving like this in the chair? He was kind of like, "Can you stay still? You're moving a lot and it's very distracting." And after that, I was just like, throughout the whole interview, I just stayed still. And I noticed a lot with Chinese people, especially like because I was interviewing with Teach Taiwan as well. When you video chat a Chinese person, they have no expression. They're just very monotone. They hardly blink. They're not saying like, oh, interesting. They're not, showing any signs of acknowledgement of what you're saying. They're just stonewall staring at you. Um, that was a red flag there. Most people probably would have thought, A, I'm not getting the job, or B, I don't want this job. I thought more A. I was like, wow, this guy just told me to stay still. Like, I like to talk with my hands, kind of like what, kind of like Donald Trump or a lot of Americans, a lot of even Mexicans, they speak with their hands. Um, I'm a very animated person. And to talk about my experience, I've been an animator for 2.5 years, and I've been an animation teacher for 2 years. So I have experience teaching already. And to go more into that, I'm going to mention more why that's important and why it's going to be weird later on when a specific someone is going to ask me about my work experience. Because to be honest, EF is a company that mostly takes in fresh graduates. That's what they prey upon. They prey upon fresh graduates from college. A lot of people there are 22 or 23 years old. And a lot of these people have never worked internationally and they're far from home. So that's also going to influence the retention rate. That this is not an easy job. You're far from home and this is your first full-time job, and it's not even a normal full-time job. They're asking for things that are way above, and I can only compare it to America, that are way above normal working hours. You're doing more hours of pre-planning and post-planning, and you think you're going in for a 7-hour workday, and it's really going to be 12 to 13 hours. but I'd like to just go back a bit. So I don't want to spoil the ending, but watch this until the very end because the ending is going to blow your mind. So much so that I have to make this video. I have to warn my fellow men. I have to warn my fellow Americans. I have to warn black people in general if you want to teach in China. And I've been to China, I've been to the Philippines, I've been to Japan. And I assure you, being black in China is not anything special. In the Philippines, I got special treatment. In Japan, I had a lot of people coming up to me and talking to me. In China, China has a very kind of closed mindset. They're not really open to new ideas. They're not really open to new foreigners. And out of all the countries I've ever visited in my life, it had the least amount of English speakers ever. Like 99% of the people I approached did not know English outside of hello and goodbye. That was it. Even at the airport, most of the people were using translators. And Japan is actually known for having very weak English speakers, but I met more native English speakers, or not native, but fluent English speakers in Japan in 1 week than I had in my entire experience and time in China. So let me fast forward. So the recruiter, he tells me to stop moving. And after that, I didn't think I'd get the job, but he sent me an offer anyway. So fast forward, a lot of us, we've gotten the offers in, for me, it was end of October, but some people it was November as well. So in the contract, it says that if you do not arrive in China by January 31st, that the contract will be completely voided and it's canceled. Granted, a lot of us are preparing for China, and the reason why I'm saying this is more for like new students is because if you're looking for a job and you need a job, most people need a job immediately. They can't wait 4 months before starting a job because you need money in the meantime. So for college students, it's perfect because you just graduated, you just finished school, maybe you wait back home, maybe you're waiting for your first job to happen. So you're not in a sense where you're already in a state where you're waiting for bills to be paid, or, you know, like if I apply for a job right now, I would like to have it right now, not 4 months in the future. So it was end of October and it was okay. Like I have my side business going and maybe a part-time job. So I just kind of waited. And January comes and I was told, hey, you're going to be in Guangzhou. You're going to be in Guangzhou. You'll love Guangzhou. And it gets close to the middle of January. And all of a sudden, the recruiter calls me and he's like, oh, by the way, is there another airport you could fly out of? Is there another airport you could fly out of? And I'm like, the closest airport is Fort Lauderdale, but I'm right by Miami International. So the Fort Lauderdale airport would be very inconvenient. And he's like, okay, I'll get back to you. And he gets back to me and he says, by the way, your flight to China is February 25th. And I've already told everyone I'm leaving January, the end of January. And all of a sudden, my flight is February 25th, an entire month later. And I'm like, okay, so what am I going to do for an extra month? Now, at this point, you are now waiting 5 months for this job to start. October, November, December, January, and February. 5 months. And I come to find out soon that it wasn't just me. And not only that, but he changed my teaching city from Guangzhou to Foshan. So everything on my paperwork said Guangzhou. All the paperwork was Guangzhou. On my visa, because we had to go get Z visas. So we all spent around 300 US. I spent 300 US, but some people spent even more to actually mail your passport to the Chinese embassy in Washington, D.C. so they can actually stamp your work visa, which is a Z visa, and send it back to you. And you had to do it in person. So if you didn't go to the embassy in person to Washington, D.C., you had to send your passport to an agency in Washington, D.C., so they can actually do it for you. And they charged a fee for it. So to get the visa costed like 175, and to actually have the agents do the stamping in person for you was also like 175. So it was close to around $300, and you had to pay for the mailing as well. So it was a lot. If you were a working professional, you wouldn't want to wait 5 months for something. You'd want to move right into the next thing. So February 25th comes, and they do a pre-arrival checklist. Like they'll call you a few days beforehand and be like, okay, you're gonna need a laptop, a VPN, so you can access, Facebook, Google, WhatsApp. And this is very important because you need to already have it pre-installed on your phone, and you won't be able to download it in China. So you need to download everything on your phone and pray that your phone doesn't break. Pray that your phone doesn't stop working for any reason whatsoever, because even if you buy a new phone in China, you will not be able to contact your people back home unless if they have Chinese apps. And 99 to 100% of the time, they won't, because when you download an app in China, you must confirm with a Chinese phone number. So your friends, your father, your mother, your brother, your sister, they won't have WeChat because they won't have a Chinese phone number. So you're screwed. Um, Either way, besides the point, they're saying that you need to have a VPN. You need to bring 10,000 yuan. I think that equates to around 1,700 US dollars. You need to bring your you need to bring your physical bachelor's degree. You need to bring the real thing, and like some photos and things like that. And they never really tell you what exactly the 10,000 yuan is for. A lot of us were just left to speculate that it was just kind of spending money before like you got your first paycheck. There's a lot of things they don't tell you until you actually arrive. Um, they did note that, hey, you can get reimbursed for your Z visa. That's one of the biggest expense a lot of us had. And I assure you, they will give you the runaround whenever it comes to reimbursements. Now, let's fast forward to when I actually arrived to China, because this is when I was able to get to the hotel. They provided a hotel free of stay for 2 weeks, quote on the free of stay. And in the hotel, that's where I met a lot of people that I would call my friends. I've met a lot of other international EF employees from South Africa, from the United Kingdom. And in the morning during during breakfast, a lot of us would brainstorm, and we were all in the same situation. We all thought we were arriving in January, only to be told that we're arriving late in February. And I thought it was because I couldn't get that Fort Lauderdale hotel. I mean, I couldn't get the Fort Lauderdale airport, that I told him that I have to fly out of Miami. And I thought, maybe I was punished because I was being, not, I was inconveniencing the company by not flying out of the airport of their choice. But it comes to my understanding with that conversation with the other employees that we all were told something different. And I was changed to Foshan from Guangzhou, and Foshan is actually pretty close to Guangzhou on the metro. It's only like a 20-minute ride on the metro. But other people got it much worse than me. They were initially signed to Chongqing, China, or Beijing, China, and all of a sudden they're in Guangzhou. So the thing about this job is that there are many, many centers. And I want to even talk about the centers, because we were told our schools, your school will be here, your school will be there. And you won't be able to find where you're working on Google Maps. On any American websites, you won't find any pictures of your center. You'll have addresses, but you won't be able to look inside. A lot of us did not know that we were working inside of malls. Most of the EF centers are actually inside of malls. Malls in China, like right next to Gucci or Prada or next to the arcade. We actually thought, or at least I actually thought, I was going to work at a school, that I would come in, you know, wearing a button up shirt and jeans with a suitcase, and I'd walk in and I'd teach English. That wasn't the initial impression. And maybe that was my fault that I didn't do enough research. But we were working at centers, which is okay. So during the first week, our onboarding, on day 2, we were told to do like medical testing. So it was like medical test. We had to go through a lot of examinations, like eye exams, hearing exams, blood test, EKGs. We did X-rays, a lot of tests that I can't even remember the names of, but it was like a full panel of tests. And I believe after we were done with that, we did a welcome dinner, and I had a few other teachers in the welcome dinner as well. And I was actually wearing this shirt. I was wearing this American T-shirt, and right now I have like pink shorts on, and it's interesting because in this welcome dinner, there was a woman who worked for the company. She invited another senior teacher from another center, and it was me, a South African teacher, a senior teacher from another center, and her. So it was the 4 of us. And we had like one of the waiters or the staff take a picture of all of us. And I received a message from my recruiter. I'm like, what? Apparently he saw the photo on WeChat or something. And he's like, by the way, Sam, when you're out in a company outing, you need to be wearing the uniform. And I was like, I haven't even received the uniform. And this was the last time I heard from the guy. But I'm like, what? I have to be wearing the uniform. And no one else had been told this. Not the other girl that I was with. So the very next day, right? The very next day, that's when we open up our bank accounts. So we go to ICBC to open up our bank accounts. And I made sure to ask. I was like, hey, da 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 da, do we have to put on our uniforms when we go to the bank? And she was like, oh, no, you don't. Just wear casual clothing, jeans, t-shirt, whatever. You don't have to wear a uniform. And I'm mentioning this because my uniform is always going to be, it's like a running gag at EF. It's always Sam's uniform. And trust me, you're going to see how it plays into the very end of the story. And I'm going to try and make it quick. All right, red flag number 2, my uniform. First thing was moving too much. Second thing was my uniform. And then also the delay from January to February, and also the change of city from Guangzhou to Foshan. And so there's a big difference between Guangzhou and Foshan, especially socially, with the population numbers. And I'll go into that much later towards the end. But let's go into regional center induction training. So after your onboarding, where you get your phone number set up, your bank card set up, your health checks and everything, you're gonna do some observations at GZ6 or whatever center they assign you to, and you're gonna do some computer work up until you reach regional center induction training. Now, this is the main training that you have to do before they send you off to your center. And in this training, you're going to have multiple people from different centers. So you're going to meet other international teachers for the first time, and actually local teachers. So there's international teachers like us, and then there's local teachers who can speak English and Chinese, and they're also a part of like the EF journey. you're gonna note that most of the local teachers tend to have more power and more position in the company as opposed to international employees and students, well, teachers, I guess. Um, so here at this center induction training, we met our trainer, Sophie, and she was very lovely. Perhaps this was probably the most positive experience I've had within uh, the EF experience for me personally. I mean, Sophie made learning very fun, and even though we made a lot of mistakes, I think we made the most mistakes during our regional induction training. We were supposed to make mistakes. We were doing mock scenarios in front of mock classrooms. We were learning about the company from start to scratch. We were learning about X factors and the different teaching toolkits and how to use the whiteboard and how to, create lessons for the 4 year olds, create lessons for the 7 year olds. You had the Bright Sparks, the High Flyers, the Trailblazers. They had different names for different courses for different ages based on different needs. Um, that wasn't the difficult part. See, at this point in your career or moving to China, at this point the hard part is living. So a lot of us were still in the hotel, and halfway during the regional induction training, we had to move out because you train in Guangzhou for a month, but you're living in the hotel in Guangzhou for 2 weeks. So halfway through, you have to find where you're gonna live. And since some of us were assigned to Foshan, we had to go get apartments in Foshan halfway through our training and commute back from Foshan back to Guangzhou. And I had to literally move out on a Tuesday afternoon, move out all my stuff to an apartment, and be back at training Wednesday morning. We didn't have much time to move, and we didn't have much time to do it. It's not like they gave us a day off and said, hey, take care of the moving thing and then come back on Thursday. So a lot of times you didn't really have day offs. They assigned me just the Sunday before. Hey, you know that Sunday where you're supposed to be not working? You're going to have to use that Sunday to go look for an apartment. So a lot of times your day offs were always you running to the PSB building to register your passport or register your residence status or look for an apartment or pick up some document from someone. At any time, they could just tell you that you have to do this and say goodbye to your personal plans, say goodbye to going out. Because the deeper you get into EF, the more responsibilities you'll have, and you just won't have a social life. I don't think I've known anyone to have a real social life. You're not going to meet or date anyone unless if they're already in the company, unless if they're already there, because they take every waking hour you have, every single waking hour, you'll be doing something EF or job related. Now, here at this center, I realized that a lot of them were given the same reimbursement speech that I was given. That we thought we'd be reimbursed for our Z visas when we arrived, and all of a sudden we were told that our line managers would take care of it. When we go to our centers. And then another gentleman told me that actually we're not going to be reimbursed when we go to our centers. We're going to be reimbursed when we complete probation. So now we're being told initially that you get reimbursed for your Z visa and you don't complete your probation until your second month. And that could be a little bit later than your second month too. So essentially you won't be getting paid. You won't be getting your money back anytime soon. And that was just another little red flag. Another major red flag is that they didn't tell us how much money we actually needed to move into an apartment. In fact, if you're a foreigner, most people would want 3 times the rent. And you also have to pay half of the realtor's fee or the agent's fee. So Foshan was cheaper than Guangzhou, so I got a little lucky. Like my rent was 1900 yuan per month. So 1900 times 3. And also you add half of the agent's fee. I think I paid around 8,000 yuan, which I think totaled around 900, close to 1,000, 900. It was 900 US dollars roughly, I believe. But other people were paying up to 1,200, $1,300 up front, and you haven't gotten paid or anything. You haven't gotten reimbursed. That 10,000 yuan that you had prior, you've already been spending that on food and transportation and just living expenses. And 2 weeks in, all of a sudden, you have to fork over close to 1,000 US dollars to find a place to live. So the upfront fee, the startup fee for China was already really high. Even though rent is cheap, 1,900 yuan is like about, I think, 250 US dollars. Rent is cheap, but paying 3 times that rent in the very beginning, and some other fees like electricity and trash, it adds up very, very quickly. And EF could have told us during the application process, during the interview process, or even maybe a little bit before we arrived, like, hey, you might want to set this money aside for your apartment. But they never told us that. And that was also extremely vexing. To continue, the training after that went very smoothly, and a lot of us felt extremely confident to reach our centers and actually start teaching. And I said goodbye to GZ6 and all the supportive people I met there. They were very open, they were very helping towards our new careers. And I always thought GZ6 was a little bit too silent and there weren't enough guys. But I would later learn that silence and boring is far better than what I was about to get into, because here it is. I've been living in Foshan, but I haven't been to the Foshan 2 Center. And now I'm tasked to go to FS2. And my journey with FS2 begins even on the train. When I was at the train, someone recognized me in uniform. Her name was Effie, and she was extremely nosy. She was just saying, "Oh, hey, who are you?" And, "Oh my God, you look like Day Day. Are you Day Day's brother?" And I really didn't know what she was talking about. Apparently, there was another black man that he's kind of similar to my height. He doesn't look like me. We don't even have the same skin color, but he's also an American. We're similar in height, and I guess that's why she called me Day Day. But this will be like a running theme, like people calling me Day Day, the students calling me Day Day, the parents calling me Day Day. Before I even got there, they were taking pictures of me near the restroom. They had a Day Day. His name is Deshawn. They had him come over, take a picture of me. I was being asked things like if I'm a rapper. It was a very like kind of like generic like Black American stuff. They were asking me if I was married. So I thought the vibe at my first day at Foshan 2 was, it was extremely intimate. Like they really wanted to know who I was and where I was from. Everyone kind of seemed welcome. You know, I went around, I shook hands with everyone. They introduced me to the rooms. But then I met our line manager, Emma. And I believe Emma was the catalyst for all the bad things that has happened to me at Foshan 2. And when I tell you about this woman, you will probably not be interested in the EF experience, because I will tell you right now, the center you are assigned to really makes or breaks your experience. My friends at GZ6 and all the other centers, they did not experience the level of harassment that I went through. They did not experience the trepidation, the fear, the intimidation that I felt when I was at Foshan 2. And it wasn't just this. So I meet everyone at Foshan 2, and you know, some of them seem like they're very, you know, they're very social, which I felt this place feels like I walked into a different company. The vibe is completely different. The offices are much tighter. Even some of the equipment they use is a bit different. But I would say the scariest thing was meeting Emma, the line manager. Just the way she interacted with me, the way she interacted with me when I first met her. She essentially said to me, "Well, you interviewed with EF, but you haven't interviewed with me." And she sat me down, and I was kind of looking at her, and I was telling her about my work experience, and I was telling her about my educational background, and she didn't even react to it. She didn't say interesting, or head nod, or she didn't smile or anything. She just looked at me with these dead eyes. And I messaged some of my friends, and I was like, Foshan 2 seems very, very interesting. It seemed that everyone was very open except for Emma. And I asked Emma that day about the reimbursement. Everyone was telling me that, ask your line manager. And she basically confirmed what we spoke about, or what I mentioned about in the center induction training with the other teachers, that you're not getting your reimbursement until you finish probation, until you pass your probation. Um, so I never brought it up again after that. Um, After that, we started something called team teaching, which team teaching is supposed to be an opportunity for you to get your feet wet. That instead of doing mock and trial teaching, you're actually going to be teaching students. Now, you don't have your own class, but you'll be working with another teacher, mostly a senior teacher, and you'll take over certain parts of their class. So sometimes you'll be responsible for opening the classroom, like introducing the rules, greeting everyone, and setting up the reward system. Or sometimes you'll be responsible for 20 minutes of grammar, or 20 minutes of reading, or 20 minutes of whatever. It can be milestones. Sometimes you'll be responsible for teaching the first hour of the class or the second hour of the class. Either way, you're responsible for something. And you're going to do this up until they think you're ready for your probationary viewing. You can have 20 team teachers, you can have 30. So I'm like, okay. My first week, they threw me into team teaching. Like most of us in our centers, you get thrown into team teaching. You'll have a combination of observations and team teachers. But my team teachers and my team teaching experience was completely different than everyone else's. It seems that theirs were a bit more supportive and mine was a bit more punitive. That I wasn't giving perfect team teachers, and I was being ridiculed or very penalized for every single minor mistake that I made. Now, at EF, one of the major rules is no speaking Chinese. They say this all the time, but you'll often find that the local Chinese teachers will actually speak a lot of Chinese during their classes. And they'll also write in Chinese, even though this is against the rules. Actually, we have some teachers who are of Chinese heritage who are international, and they only speak English in their classrooms. They don't allow Chinese speaking at all. So a lot of times the rules are extremely bent when it comes to things like the policies with uniform. When I arrived to Foshan 2, I was made aware that my uniform was too small. That if I lifted my arms like really, really high, you can see a little bit of my belly or my underwear or something. I noted that this was the same with almost everyone who didn't have a shirt that was tucked in. You can raise your arms to a point where you will see a bit of your belly at some point. But my solution was to borrow a company jacket, because they did order me more uniforms and a jacket, but it took time for it to arrive. So I borrowed a company jacket, and I was assigned a mentor. So every new teacher is assigned a mentor. And my mentor, she was a bit of an old head. She looked like she was in her 50s. And, I'm recently 30 years old. A lot of other people's mentors were closer to their age, they were more youthful. And I was assigned Cece. And Cece was probably a huge influence to the downfall of my time at EF, as well as my experience with Emma moving forward. So every week, you have something called a mentors meeting, and Emma would sit in for some particular reason. She would sit in on my mentors meetings. So she would be as if doing an observation. So when you do an observation at EF, they just put you in the back of the class and you just take notes. And I have to mention this because this will be very important later. When you're doing an observation, you're not interacting with the class, you're not interacting with students, you're not interacting with parents. You're merely in the back of a classroom taking notes on things that you like, things that you don't like, things that you want to implement in your classrooms, and how a teacher or a TA or someone is conducting the classroom. It's an observation, and you have a takeaway. So during my teachers meetings with with Cece, Emma would sit in the back of the classroom and she would observe. And Cece, the way she would word her questions, it was never her saying something positive about me. It was always saying, well, you did a team teach with Valerie and you forgot to award points, or you forgot to remove points. They're very heavy on the reward system, that if someone does something wrong, you have to remove stars, you have to take away stars. If someone speaks Chinese, you have to take away stars. If a student is acting unruly, you have to discipline them by removing stars. And when you're first learning, sometimes you just forget to remove stars. Sometimes you forget to give people stars. Sometimes you forget to give people the high fives that they really want you to give high fives a lot. You're learning, right? You're learning to get better with the IWB, the interactive whiteboard. You're learning how to open the lesson plans quicker, how to make screenshots quicker. But I was looking at a lot of my feedback, and it never really matched the things that people would tell me. A lot of times people would tell me, hey, good job on that team teach. I like the way you opened up the classroom. I like the way you had the students engage with you. And then when I looked at my team teachers' feedback, like we had this file, there's an ongoing file that every time you team taught with someone, a teacher would input their feedback. The feedback was mostly negative. So in my mentors meeting with Cece only addressed the negative feedback. She never really mentioned any of the good things that I did, which to Emma in the back, she seemed very vexed and angry that, Cece is only mentioning the negative things in my team teachers and not the positive things. And this would be a detrimental way of thinking moving forward, because I was always in a position where I had to defend why I didn't do something instead of, being praised or regarded for something that I did do, like getting 90% on a test, but being scolded for the 10 points you missed out of 100. It always felt like they never said anything like, oh, you had good X factors, or you had good humor, you taught the lesson, you finished the lesson, or you're still learning, or, it's interesting because when we learned about parent teacher But it's interesting, when we learned about parent teacher conferences, they said that you should always start with the positives about the student, the good things that they do, and then lead in with the negative, the things they can improve on, the things that they're struggling with. Because you don't want to start the parent teacher conference with, oh, your student is very bad at reading, he doesn't pay attention. This can anger the parent. I always found that we give the students this courtesy, but this courtesy wasn't given to teachers. Um, Within my entire time at Foshan 2, there were only like two teachers who actually, and they weren't my mentors, but I really wish they were. There were only two teachers who actually really said something positive about my lessons, things that I actually did, and actually really helped me, with my lesson planning and my IWB and everything. Now, to go into more detail, when I had the second meeting with Cece, um, I had to address my uniform and everything that she accused me of not doing. I had to defend myself and kind of go with the logic. So the first thing was the uniform, and I was like, yeah, my shirt is a bit too small. So I put the EF company jacket, but apparently the one I was wearing was the older model. They had a newer model. I was wearing one that was like white and blue, but they had an updated one that was all blue. And Emma, she just looks at me and she says, "Do you think that was a good idea?" And I'm confused because Cece just praised me earlier that morning. That she went on WeChat and she was like, "Oh, I'm glad that you put on a jacket to kind of cover up the uniform." I mean, no one was complaining about my uniform at regional induction training. No one said it was too small. No one said it was too small at GC6 during those observations. But all of a sudden, my uniform is too small, and that's fine. So I say, "Hey, I just put on the company jacket." And Emma just berates me. She's like, "Do you think that was a good idea? Why didn't you go buy a new shirt at the gift shop?" She wanted me to buy like this white shirt that had the EF company logo. And I didn't even know that we can do that. I didn't know that that was an option, that you can buy clothing from the EF gift shop or something. I thought that gift shop was only just for students to trade in their EF bucks and tokens for free merchandise. In fact, when I spoke to my colleagues about it, they were mind blown too. They didn't know that you could buy EF clothing. It's the first time they ever heard about it. And Emma, she just seemed to just be particularly really angry at me. And then she says, well, Sam, you're not on track. You're not on track according to the other new teachers." And I found that a particularly strange statement because the other new teachers, they were here 3 to 4 weeks before me. At that point, I was the newest teacher at Foshan, and this was just the first week. I've only had like 2 or 3 team teachers at this point, and apparently I wasn't on track. But what was scarier was that she didn't mention what areas I needed to particularly improve in or what areas that I was lacking in. She just said I wasn't on track, moving at the same pace as the other new teachers. And this will be a running theme because she's going to say this again. And when she says it again, it's not going to have any more clarity than the first time. So this was Emma. This is our second main interaction, and she's already really pissed at me for something. And we talk about my past team teachers. And in one team teach, I did a team teach with a teacher who opened up this brand new program that I wasn't trained on, that I've never seen. And we're supposed to assign points on a program called EasyNote. And she opened up a new software application that I've never been trained on, that I've never seen. And they were saying, "Well, do you use the reward system, or do you take away points?" And I saw that the teachers' meetings were a bit flawed because if I did one thing wrong in one particular team teach, the way Cece would ask the question, it made it seem like I wasn't doing something on all the team teaches. So if I didn't use the reward system in this one particular team teach where a student where a teacher used a new application that I wasn't trained on. It looks like for all four of my team teachers that I didn't use the reward system. Or if I didn't play a video, it would seem like I didn't do that for all of the four team teachers. So the way my mentor Cece was asking me questions, it made me seem super incompetent. And it was at this point I was like, okay, perhaps maybe I should pack my bags and go, because it doesn't really look like Cece is actually helping me as a mentor, and it doesn't really seem like Emma is particularly too happy with me. But after that, I tried really, really hard on my team teachers. I put in double the effort, double the time, and nothing really much changed. I was responsible for like 20 minutes of grammar. I would spend 2 hours planning for it. If I was responsible for 40 minutes of reading, I would spend 4 hours planning my lessons. And my workflow was the same. They say before you do a team teach, have your lesson plan in front of give your lesson plan to your co-teacher, your partner teacher that you'll be teaching with. I've always done that. I've always tagged them. I would link them on Google so they can see the document, as well as I would print it out and I would put it right in front of them 24 hours beforehand. So if my teaching was the next day, I would give them my lesson plan physically the day before so we can sit through it, go through it, and see if they liked it or not. A lot of times I would sit down with a partner teacher, they would go through my lesson plan, they would okay it, and then when I would teach it, they would find problems with what they approved, the content that they approved, or how I was going about giving it. Sometimes I had team teaches where I was accused of skipping entire parts that I know that I did not skip. I was accused of one time not pre-reading a story where I was solely responsible for reading that day. And in fact, I definitely pre-read the story because we're supposed to follow something called the teacher's notes. And in the teacher's notes, we're supposed to actually read the story 3 times, but in 3 different ways. And a lot of times we have something called a CCQ, which is a concept check question. And we do this to actually see if the students are understanding us as we move along in content. If they understand sometimes our instructions, if they understand what they're supposed to do in the workbook, if they understand the story, if they understand the characters in the story, if they understand what they're looking at. So when we pre-read a story, we will say things like, who is this? What is that? Just to see if the students can recognize, like, hey, this is a cake, or this is a character we have named Ben. This is a character we have named Fleet. This is a character we have named Roddy. If they can recognize these characters and maybe some things that they're holding or doing, which would help them read the story. So we would call this pre-reading. And there was a time I was team teaching, with a woman named Diana, and she was cool, but for some reason, she never had anything good to say about my lesson plans. And according to her, I failed all my lesson aims. And I found it very strange. She accused me of not pre-reading the story and not error correcting the students as we read the story. And whenever I read a story and I see a student is struggling, I would have them read with me. I would help them fill in the blank of the missing word that they can't read. And then I would have them reread it to see if they can actually do it without my help. To continue, at that point, I found it very, very suspicious and strange that I was in a situation where if I said that I didn't do it, that it would make me look very incompetent. But if I did say that I did do it, now I seem argumentative. I seem like I'm unreasonable. Diana, I did two team teaches with her, and I was accused of three things. I was accused of not pre-reading. I was accused of not playing the audio twice. So usually when you're doing an audio segment, there's like something where the students have to listen and they have to write. And I was accused of only playing the audio once. And I always play that audio twice. Sometimes I play it three times. Um, so I was thinking the first time she accused me of not doing something that perhaps maybe, it slipped my mind. Though I was pretty sure that I did like play the audio twice or something. But the next day I had a team teach with Diana again, and now I was being accused of two more things that I know for sure that I did, but she said that I didn't. And now I'm coming off as unreasonable or argumentative, but I couldn't come off as incompetent. I couldn't let the rumor spread that, I'm not reading the reading correctly, or I'm not pre-reading, or I'm not correcting students and I'm letting them fumble through words. Like, that's very strange. Like, I would correct anyone's English or reading, even in real life, for free, you know? So why would I, let a lot of Chinese kids read the text on their own and not correct or grade their language? It was a very strange accusation, but this is when it came to mind that I should probably record myself, record my own class, set up a camera in the back to defend myself from accusations where someone is saying that I'm not doing something that I've done. And what's worse is that it really didn't matter if I refuted the claim or not, because Diana was going to go in her notes and just write it anyway. She was just going to write that teacher didn't play the audio twice and teacher argued with me about it. So looking at my notes a week later, things didn't really improve. And though I had like one or two teachers saying good things about me, I would have two or three write mostly negative things about me. And it didn't really matter how well my team teachers were after that. I was doing extraneous things like putting